Hello and welcome back to Module 2.9, which is Practical Programming and Making Content. Today we're looking at class 13 of 15 of this specific module, so we're almost at the end. And in the previous lesson, we looked at show prep in detail with the idea that you should be able to demonstrate and understand the process of how to compile show prep. In order for you to be able to use it on air, you should be able to start mastering the art of descriptive detail, so how to describe something. You should be able to understand the importance of show prep. Why is show prep so important before going on to your show? And then you should be able to show how you should be creative with regards to show prep and just understand how to utilize it and how it differs, okay, or how it can differ. The important part is to realize that there are no successful radio personalities who are unprepared or who rely on ad-libbed pieces to carry their performances. Why? Because the sources of material to be used on radio shows are limitless, timeless, they're everywhere. And it includes you as a presenter, your own life, okay? You have stories on a day-to-day basis you can use as show prep. So an important part of your show prep are the team members that are assembled that assist you with the prep. And one of these, and probably the most important one, is the producer. So what we'll be looking at today in detail are producers. If you want to go to your textbook, we are looking at Beyond Powerful Radio, so Valerie Geller's book, from page 149 to page 158, so that's chapter 11, Producers Facing the Blank Page. Before we get started on today's lesson, I want to take you through something that I want you to start thinking about. Imagine you are the producer for a major market radio show, so a very big station, obviously a commercial radio station, and you have the opportunity to book your dream guest for an interview. Anyone, so whoever it is, you can get them on your show. You also need to have a plan B in case that guest can't make it, so in case they cancel, or in case any unforeseen problem arises, okay? Because unfortunately in life things happen that will make someone might have to cancel at a point, okay? So you need a plan B also. You will then have to fill in this worksheet with the appropriate answers. So with the appropriate answers, the success of the show depends on it. So firstly, who is your guest? Why is that person in studio? Why are you getting them in? What have they done? What have they accomplished? Where do they live or where do they come from? You'll need to present materials, so books, articles, recordings, whatever it is about the guest to the host. Because remember, you might know this person in detail because it's your dream guest, but the presenter doesn't. So you'll need to get everything that you can for the presenter to be able to talk about them. And then you'll need to check with your presenter. Are they interested to talk to this person? Why? What is it that piqued the presenter's interest in this person, okay? This is useful when you're trying to get a sense of what the host might like for future shows. So you can put in your own opinions before you show it to the presenter. And then you check with the presenter, what would they like from this guest, from their point of view? Would they want them in studio? Would they want it to be a phoner? Would they want it to be pre-recorded? How would they want to handle this interview? How long do they want the piece to be, okay? How much time can we put aside for this person? If it's your dream guest, then I'm assuming it's someone really, really important. So you'd probably want to put aside more time, okay? Instead of just doing a normal 5-minute interview. And then, very importantly, what is your plan B? What do you do if this person does not pitch? If this was an in-person, in-studio interview, and this person lets you know on number 99 that something has come up, so they won't be able to make it, what is your plan B? What do you do then? Think about that so long, because that's going to be your homework also. But with that, let's look at a producer. Producing is a tough gig. When the show goes well, the host gets the credit. But when it goes badly, often the producer will be the one who will be blamed. Good producer jobs are difficult to get. Most demand long, stressful hours for little reward and a low salary. Although a lot of presenters produce their own shows, in talk radio, particularly in the major markets, so again, the big commercial radio stations, a producer can add significantly to the success of the program. So often what you find is that hosts will continuously be looking for new producers, and producers will continuously be looking for new shows or new hosts to work with, because they might hate the host that they're working with, but they don't just want to leave the show, so leave their baby as is. So they might look for another producer to take their role, etc. Okay, so how do you find the right producer? How do you find the right fit? So if you are a producer, how do you make sure that the host and you will get along? If you're the presenter, how do you make sure that the producer is the right fit with you? As with any good relationship, the producer and the host must listen to each other. That's really important. Both share the same goals for the show, and they'll spend a lot of time together. Okay, so a presenter and a producer do spend a lot of time together. Someone once said, it was easier to find my wife than the right producer. So with that being said, now how do we go about it? How do we go about finding the right producer? When you are on the air as a presenter, it's almost like being naked in public. You're exposed and you're vulnerable. It's just you, the phones, and the microphone. You need a producer who's on your side. Supportive when you feel alone on the air, a presence beyond the glass wall. A producer is someone who believes in your show and wants to make you and the product sound great. That's not necessarily the same thing as agreeing with your host at all times. That's important to realize. Some great producers give their all for the hosts who don't have the same beliefs that they do, okay? Why? Because professionals can work with just about anyone. That's why they are professionals. Of course, the producer doesn't have to like the host or the presenter to be able to produce a successful program, but there needs to be respect. I'm 100% sure not everyone likes me, just as not everyone likes their managers or their bosses. But there needs to be respect in order for you to keep working for that person or with that person. If the presenter knows that he or she has the support of a sharp and a talented producer, the show works better at the end of the day, and that's what you want. So great producers aren't born, they are developed. Remember how I always say the opposite with regards to presenters. We say that great presenters are born. You can learn the basic skills, but either you have it or you don't. It's different when it comes to producers. A great producer is not born, they are developed. Ideally, you want this producer to be able to fit in not just with the show, but with the presenter also, or not just with the presenter, but also with the show. If you're hiring a producer, look for potential and for promise. Ask questions. Ask, is this person bright? Obviously, you need an intelligent person. Is this person good at handling pressure? Because producers work under a lot of strain and pressure. Is this person fearless? Can this producer pick up the phone and call the presidency as easily as they can call the shop down the road? Can he or she get along with the news department, because that's really important? Do they have ideas? Can this person say no, because that's also needed? Does he or she like listening to talk radio and like listening to you? Very important. Don't hire someone who wants to be on air. If that's their end goal, you don't want to be watching your back the whole time. And it normally doesn't work out if you hire someone who wants to be on air. The job of producing is more a directing job than an acting job. Although a lot of presenters produce their own shows, successful producers who excel at this kind of position enjoys the behind the scenes aspect of making things happen. You as a host shouldn't have to worry that the producer is trying to take over your job and secretly working towards that goal, instead of putting energy and skill into producing a great show. Sometimes you get lucky and the right producer finds you. Often the best presenters are listeners first, so people who enjoy listening to the show. Keep in mind, these are the ones who like listening to the show without being paid to do so. Okay, that's important. Think about a couple of good examples of people that you know or shows that you listen to where the presenter and the producer just work really well together. You'll normally find that the producer and the presenter in cases like that have been working together for years. Okay, it's not a brand new relationship. A very good example of people that a really good example is 5FM's afternoon drive host, so Nick Hammond with Mad Money Mike. They've been coming together for the last 6-7 odd years, so they have one of those very good working relationships. Something that I also want to mention here is I want you to think back to when we did a generator and a reactor. I mentioned to you that it's not always simply the presenters that you need to be able to suss out which one is a generator or a reactor. The same goes with the producer. If your host is a reactor, you are looking for a generator in the producer. So in this case, you need the producer to fill a specific role. It could be vice versa also, okay? It could be that you have a really strong generator and that you just need a reactor to help them flesh out their stories and everything else that goes into it. So that's another thing to think of, is where you're going to place this presenter, or rather where you're going to place this producer, which show you're putting them on, who is already on the show, what kind of presenter or host is on that show currently. Keep the good ones. So a lot of radio stations are very sloppy when it comes to hiring and hanging on to good producers. Good producers are often forced to go to television or to leave the industry if they want to be paid what they are worth. There's very little producer training or job security available. It's literally a trial by fire, okay, kind of a position. If you find a good producer, do whatever it takes to keep him or her. A good producer can contribute tremendously towards making your show a powerful radio. Do not underestimate the power of a great producer. At the same time, a bad producer or an angry producer can do a lot of damage. So try not to upset them for no reason. And try to find it in your budget, if you are the station manager, to pay them for the valuable work that they do. Because when the right combination of a host and a producer comes together, it's really something to see. On that lucky day and forever after, something that's important to remember about this presenter-producer relationship is that you need to be patient. You need to be able to work it out, not walk out, okay? Make the producer feel valued. Why? Because today's producers are tomorrow's program directors. So often when talent managers or when consultants or whoever you get in start searching for a new program director or a new program manager or even a new station manager, they take a serious look at who is behind the scenes. So who is screening and producing the best shows? And then share the wealth. When you become a presenter, treat your producer nicely, treat them well. As a presenter, you get all the glory and the producers are underpaid. You get the credit and they're the ones that get yelled at the end of the day. When you get all that freebies, okay, share the perks. Share the books, the free meals, the free tickets. Give them honest feedback, okay? Take them to lunches. If you blow up at them for some reason, remember this is a creative atmosphere, it does happen, but apologize. And if at any point you get a ratings bonus, share some of that with your producer, because if it wasn't for your producer, you wouldn't have gotten that ratings bonus. Thank them publicly, and you can do this at the same time as you're thanking your guests or your listeners. Why do you do this? Because your producer will feel just as appreciated as your listeners or your guests will. Don't simply hire someone, okay? So don't hire a blind date. Don't hire someone you don't know yet. So what do you do in that case? You get to know your producer first. Try them out before you make the final hire. So interns sometimes work out very well as producers after they get to know the ropes. Insist on having some input into the hiring process. Be open to working with someone who's not like you. Life stage differences can be extremely valuable, and it brings a different perspective to the show. So if you were a male or you hire a young female student, together you now also have a couple's perspective that can, at the end of the day, only help the show. Make sure that your producer has good judgment. Choose a producer who understands that this is, who understands that you are doing a radio show. So someone who understands that it should be fun and it should be entertaining and it shouldn't be a forum of long-winded interviews. Because again, your job is to keep the audience engaged. Your producer should never promise someone more than a few minutes on air. Make sure that your producer can be flexible, okay? That they understand that a great show doesn't always stick to one topic, especially a great talk show. If something spontaneous happens on air, they should be able to go with it, okay? They should be flexible in that way. If you hire someone who can only go on schedule, you might miss out on a really great radio opportunity in a case like this. Although there isn't a crystal ball, okay, there's no way of seeing whether the producer that you have is the correct producer. But there are some personality traits that will make it better matches. And again, I refer to chapter 2, where we spoke about, are you a generator or are you a reactor? So you want to try and find the right fit with each presenter and each producer. A reactive host will work the best with a generative producer. And to do his or her best work, a generative host needs a reactive producer. A generative producer, even one that is not on the air, must still come up with the original ideas and be responsible for feeding the host talkable topics that can be worked into a theme for the show. There isn't a formula for choosing show topics either, but experience has taught us. But there are definitely a few things that work and that don't work. Avoid the manufactured hour. The closer the show sounds to real life, with genuine people having real conversations, the better it works. So try to avoid easy stories from headlines or from press releases, anything that sounds very generic. If you wouldn't be talking about this off air, then why are you putting it on the show? Listeners prefer programs that sound as though the conversation should just as easily be taking place off air, or could just as easily be taking place off air. Creating radio means never being boring. If a subject or a topic has been extensively covered and there's nothing new that you can add to it, then should you really be talking about it? Is it really powerful radio? Resist the temptation to book a celebrity or a guest or experts simply because they are available to you. Never book a guest without a reason. You should always be able to ask yourself, would the listeners care? Your job is to get and to keep audiences. Don't book a guest just because you think that they might be able to generate phone calls. Sometimes a great show has very little or no calls, and a bad show might have a whole show full of calls. Remember when we spoke about what can get you to tune out? One of the things were if there were too many calls on the line or too many calls on the show. Then know your source. It's fine to use the internet or prep services or current events or news stories for content. But you as a producer should also bring your own original stories and ideas to the show. Producers should read widely, okay? You should have a lot of knowledge. You should listen to the competition. So you should listen to other radio stations. And you should generate ideas based on life. Just a word of caution with regards to the internet. It's very easy to Google guests and to come up with names and sources, but the internet is not necessarily a reliable source of accurate information. The beauty of the internet is that everyone has equal access, okay? Meaning that a lunatic in his garage can put up a website or create a blog that looks just as impressive as a university's blog or website. Some sites, such as those belonging to major newspapers, are more trustworthy than others, okay? Sites about gossip and rumor and innuendos and urban myth are still useful, providing that you acknowledge where you are getting that information from. Don't undermine your credibility by presenting uncorroborated information as fact. The following simple techniques should bring several topics to the host or presenter that no one else will be able to cover in that same way. Firstly, your life. Bring an idea from your own life, something that has happened to you, okay? No one else will have that exact same story because it's your personal experience. Secondly, something that you've overheard or observed. Something that you've witnessed directly or directly overheard. It's also a good topic to bring because, again, it's your experience. And then third, bring one item of news that you would actually have spoken about to another person in real life if you didn't have to produce a radio show. So something that you know to be talk-worthy. In each case, find the universal angle. So again, there are some stories that are personal, okay, that are private, but then you find the universal angle in it. What is this universal angle that I've spoken about so often? The universal angle is a common thread or a common dynamic that affects everyone. Often the details of a story are interesting only to the participants and are no one else's business. While the personal is universal, the private can be boring. So the other customers were looking away, obviously feeling very uncomfortable in the situation and feeling appalled. But it gave the woman who was buying her coffee, who was hearing this, an idea as she was a producer. She took this idea that she had to her presenter, and they opened their show this way. What possesses you to think you are alone in your living room when you are talking on your mobile phone? Have you ever overheard one of those excruciating conversations? You know, the kind where you would like the earth to just open up and swallow you whole because it's so embarrassing to hear. What is the most awful conversation you've ever overheard in the public when someone has been on their cell phone. And then they got a caller in, and the caller spoke to them about his morning experience, where on the way to work, along with everyone else in the bus, he overheard a fellow passenger being fired. And that's how one producer's morning coffee stop led to a universal angle that created powerful radio. Real people share real stories. Another producer helped his presenter to get a universal angle from his own private story. So the presenter promised his wife that he would paint the garage, but because he preferred to watch football on Sundays, they got into a huge fight. He and his producer decided that the paint, the garage, and the argument were his private life, but there was a universal angle to work into the show. So how they took this to air was, they started with saying that, why do women nag? Why is it that a woman will ask you over and over again to do something when you've told her 10 times you to do it? If it's on your list, you intend to do it? And then a woman responded, well, if you guys would just do the things we asked you to do, we wouldn't have to turn into nagging shrews. Meanwhile, the producer found a psychologist who had just published a study on male-female relationships. It seems that most men don't care about whether a woman gained weight or was a lousy cook. What they hate was nagging. Why? Because their mom nagged them. The topic went on for 2 hours with lots of humor. It took a talented producer to help find the universal angle and focus it for on air. And then formatics count. It's important that you have a producer who understands the logic behind formatics. Lots of producers know the basics, but they're never told why the basics matter so much. Why it's crucial to mention the station's name, why it's crucial to mention the frequency before each caller goes to air, and to reset the topic every few minutes and after commercial breaks. As long as we are working with ratings that are based on recall, like the RAMs that we use in South Africa, our diaries, what the listener remembers and reports to the ratings is what will matter, okay? Recall is super important. Memory is not that reliable. If people don't even remember what they ate for breakfast, how are they going to remember what they listened to last week at 7:15, last Thursday at 7:15? How can they be expected to report accurately about what they've heard to the market research interviewer? Of course they can't, okay? Because of that, some radio listening, referred to as phantom Q, is never counted in the ratings. Your staff needs to understand the importance of helping listeners to retain and write down your frequency by repeating them on air as often as possible. Okay, so Giller Media International came up with the producer's top 10, with the producer's 10 commandments, which are as follows. Firstly, know the host or the presenter and his or her audience as well. So know the person. So the producer needs to know the presenter, but he also needs to understand who is listening. But he or she also needs to understand who is listening, okay? Number two, do not covet your host's air shift, but be a faithful listener to it. Don't try to take the host's airtime, but rather just be a listener. Number 3, never put a boring caller or guest on air. Never, never, okay? This is a very big rule. Number 4, have only one director or programming manager giving input. Number 5, pay close attention to details so your host or your presenter won't have to, and remember your address list or your database and keep it up to date. It's important that you always have a database that's up to date. Number 6, be organized, able to easily and quickly locate a contact and find the things your host or presenter put down and loses. Never throw away a phone number, an email address, or even a good takeout menu, because you never know when they'd come in handy. Number 7, know the internet world and the real world. Read up and live in them both. So understand both, okay? Have your own real life stories also. Number 8, have a life outside the radio station. It will serve you as show prep 24 hours a day, every day, providing you with creative topics and angles nobody else is doing. Number 9, study the station and learn to do everything. The payoff will go to the producer who can run the board, edit and assemble audio, set up a remote, screen calls, make coffee, plan events, or travel. So you need to be able to do everything. And lastly, number 10, foster good relationships between yourself and the rest of the radio station, okay? So between yourself and the presenter or the show and the rest of the station, especially the news and the sales department, because both of them are really important in your day-to-day. Okay, so in summary, it's important that you understand the role of a producer, how important it is, but also at the same time, understand the lack of recognition that producers can get, and the remuneration that often goes with the job, okay? And why producers might leave their roles, and what it will take for you to keep a good producer. Number 2, finding the right producer is to rodeo as finding the right spouse is to a relationship. It must be a good match or there will be a radio divorce at some point. Number 3, good producers can be developed just as great talent can, okay? So you can work with someone, you can develop them. Number 4, if you have a good one, do what's necessary to keep him or her. 5, give a new presenter a trial run before hiring them to make sure that they actually fit in with the station and with the presenter. 6, good judgment and awareness of the medium and flexibility are all good qualities of a producer. 7, go back to chapter 2, read up again on a generator and a reactor and their pairings, okay? The same rules apply to morning show hosts and producers. Number 8, a cautionary word about the internet as a source. It's not necessarily always reliable. And lastly, number 9, the universal angle of a topic comes from the host's own life. That brings me to the end of this lecture. There's a lot to take in, but please remember how important a production or a producer role is to a radio station, how important a producer themselves are, okay? And then let's go back to these first 2 slides that I want you to look at for homework. So now that you've gone through everything with regards to what it takes to be a producer, you are now the show producer for a big commercial radio station, and you have the opportunity to book your dream guest for an interview. You also need to formulate a plan B for in case the guest cancels or for in case there's an unforeseen problem. You need to fill in the workshop below with the appropriate answers. The success of your show depends on it. So who is your guest? Why are they there? What have they done? Where do they come from? Present materials about the guest to the presenter. And then with regards to what you're checking with your presenter, you need to check, are they interested? Why are they interested? What is it that piqued their interest with regards to this interviewer? You need to know this for future shows. What would your presenter like from this guest? Do they want the guest in studio by phone or pre-recorded? How long do they want the piece to be? And what is plan B? Okay, that's what I want you to do for me for homework and to send back to me, okay? So that we can talk about it the next time I see you live. So this should have given you a really good idea with regards to a producer. And in the next lecture, we will continue looking at producers, okay? And with that, I say goodbye for today. Bye.